welcome to October and the first ever spooky episode of Northside Now. This is the podcast where your mischievous hosts take you on a tour through all the ministries and the strange happenings around Northside Church. I'm one of your spooktacular hosts, Patrick, and with me as always are my co-hosts, the bone-chilling Glenn Miller and the hair-raising Kevin Bryant. And also special guest in the studio today is the spine-tingling Kevin Glenn.
People are dying to hear me.
How's it going, guys?
Great.
That was quite possibly the best intro I've heard today.
You're our host, our ghost host.
We're four disembodied voices coming to you from the other side.
That's right.
It's nice to be in the podcast room with the Vincent Price of Northside over here.
Oh, yes.
So
I've been called worse.
yeah, really. So that's very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we're October, man.
We made it.
October. Yeah.
It's flown by
It has flown by in a hurry.
to me.
And I'm very upset. I'm very upset today.
Why is that?
I cannot find any more autumn mix candy corn. All the
Really?
good candy corns are gone. They're just down to the regular natural candy corn now.
Most of the people in my family would say good. They just don't like candy corn. They just say
Yeah.
it's wax with some flavor.
I like candy corn.
I like
I
candy
love
corn.
it
and
too.
the little pumpkins.
The pumpkins.
Yeah.
Now Chief loves the pumpkins. They become like dog treats at our house.
He jumps around even more than he normally would.
does. He loves those things. But I really like the ones with the little chocolate caramel thingy on the top. instead
Oh,
of the
yeah.
yellow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I can't find them anywhere. They're gone already.
You just transition to pumpkin spice
Yeah.
for a while. And you'll overload on that, and then you come back.
I'll just be very upset if they're at a port in LA or something and they're not in my grocery store.
They might be.
My first world problems of the year.
They're on the same ship that all the microchips are on.
Yeah, they're
That's right.
sitting there next to somebody's car that they had ordered 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, it's good. So good to be with everyone, and we have all kinds of fun things. Ron's going to be here from board of directors in a little while, and so that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I can finally figure out how the church works.
Yeah, that is going to be very helpful. You know, I need to quit using like trustees. I need to talk to one of the trustees. We don't have.
Yeah, we don't have
Right.
trustees anymore. Yeah.
But of course, I also have said council on ministries occasionally. And, you know, they don't have that model anymore, even in the United Methodist Church. So it's hard to keep up with all the change.
Old tricks die hard.
I do.
Old
I
habits.
do.
Yes.
You know, kind of like, woo. Well, Rev Kev, it's been a couple of weeks since you've been here as
Yeah.
well. And how are the FAQs going?
Oh, a lot of fun.
Good.
A lot of fun. Yeah. And people keep telling me they're coming, they're checking it out, or they're hearing about it.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming the things that they are hearing are good because they keep showing up, or they're hearing that it's a train wreck and a dumpster fire, and they just want to come watch me crash and burn.
Either way, come listen to
That's
Kevin
right.
every Wednesday night.
You won't be disappointed.
That's right. I might be digging my own grave. But no, we're having a good time. The questions are good. We just finished up. I think we spent maybe 4 weeks on the question of women pastors, women leaders, and of course, you know, everybody got a chuckle when after all that I said, so that's why I believe yes, women can be pastors.
Right.
It was fun, but yeah, it just kind of a demonstration that there's way more to it, that question and many others than a lot of times we hear about or consider. So yeah, it's been good. And then let's see, this comes out on Tuesday. So the previous one we talked about the reliability of Scripture, and that seemed to be a good conversation and a good time. And so we'll continue on. So what I want to tease, though, is that tomorrow night's Frequently Asked Questions, for those of you who listen to or were here or were listening or not or sleeping through the sermon this past Sunday, we concluded the series, The Next Right Step. And most of you know that was of chapters 1 through 6 of Joshua. So after all of that time, we finally got to the walls of Jericho. We know that story. It's very, very familiar. It's even a finishing move for WWE superstar Chris Jericho. But aside from purple slushies and fun kid songs about marching around and the walls coming down, there's a passage of scripture there in verse 20 of chapter 6 where it says they went into the city and they put to the sword men, women, young and old, which also means children, and animals.
Such a warm, fuzzy finish to the story.
Yeah, Phil Vischer just didn't touch that one with Veggie
Right.
Tales, and
Exactly.
most none of the children's church songs that I remember singing address that.
I don't remember those figures on the flannel board either.
No. And so so what do you do with that?
Right.
And of course, this past Sunday, it's way too big a topic to get into on a Sunday morning, but I am going to unpack it tomorrow night.
Okay,
Going to unpack it. And for those who were not there this past Sunday, the one thing I did say, because really the question comes up, so what do we make of God ordering the killing of from the way it seems to read, women and children and animals and everything. And then we turn around and, God is a God of grace and love. And so it is tough. And, there are quite a few different explanations, and one of the more popular explanations, and it's not completely, it's not wrong, but it's kind of incomplete. It is true that God had given centuries. He had given centuries for the Canaanites to repent of some really, really, bad stuff. One thing I will say here on the podcast, and what I'm about to say is not suitable for young children. So if you have little ones listening to this, you might want to scurry them off to another room real quick. So hit pause, do that. 3, 2, 1. One of the customs in the days of Jericho, whenever it was built and during that time, was to sacrifice children and to take the remains of the sacrificed children and pour them into the foundation and build the walls on top of the bones of sacrificed children to their gods. And so that's part of what we're dealing with Josh. Practices of sorcery, child sacrifice, idolatry, brutality, and attacking defenseless people. And that's just what they did. And there's even more horribly graphic stuff that they did to other people and to each other. And God actually allowed the Israelites to continue to languish in slavery in Egypt for 400 some odd years. Because prior to that, he even said to Abraham, the iniquity of the Amorites, who were the Canaanite people, is not at its full just yet. So for centuries, they had opportunities to repent. And we know that they knew about Yahweh because something that Rahab let out of the bag, she says, we've heard about you.
Right.
We've heard about the Red Sea. We've heard about how God has been with you and how God has done all this stuff. And our hearts melted, with fear. Okay. That's usually your cue to repent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if the rest of the city had done what Rahab did, who knows how the story would have been different. But still, what do we make of that? Here's what I said Sunday. I'll say it again here, and this is really the only teasing of it. I do think, in fact, I believe firmly that when we get behind some of the historical layers and context of what kind of literature we're dealing with in Joshua 6, some ways that we haven't really been made aware of the world of that day, it can shed a light on what the text is saying and what it's not saying. And here's just one example. This is the one example that I shared on Sunday. If you look closely at chapter 6, verse 1, whenever God says, I've given you the city, its king and fighting men. Now pay attention to that. Okay, so that's one little clue to where we're going here. Plus the city. The term city there in Hebrew is a Hebrew word that looks like if it were transliterated just the letters I and R. Okay? That specific word, that specific term, does not refer to residential areas. That term is very, very specific, and it's translated cities, but it refers specifically to government and military outposts and strongholds. So that's consistent, of course, with God saying, I've given the city to you, its king and fighting men. Archaeological excavations have never found any evidence of a civilian population within the ruins of Jericho. Plus, the way that cities and things were set up back then, the residents would have been in kind of Bedouin type of dwellings and villages out in the surrounding area where there's nothing in the text about those being attacked. Plus, Exodus and Deuteronomy talk about God using hornets and angels and different means and methods to drive people out before military conquests. So you couple that also with, the lack of there being a civilian population. What about Rahab? Well, of course, within a military compound, you're going to have a brothel, right? So you put all that together, and it's very, very unlikely. And the last little thing is, much like in the New Testament, whenever Paul is writing about how couples and children and wives and husbands are to relate to each other, he's using the form of the cultural thing of a very popular cultural thing called household codes. He's writing in that form. In Joshua chapter 6 and in many other places in the Old Testament, it's a specific form of literature that is exclusive to descriptions of military conquest. And they use very, very exaggerated and embellished language. And there are phrases that are common, whether it's Hebrew, Canaanite, Amorite, and some of those phrases are, every living thing in the city was put to the sword. Young and old men and women and livestock were utterly destroyed. And so you find those consistently used by the victors in describing their victory. And it was a way, it's kind of like saying, unfortunately, the Rams beat the Buccaneers. Well, they didn't go out and beat anybody, whack anybody, where they annihilated them, they eviscerated them, they destroyed them. Well, that actually didn't happen, but that's the terms that we use to describe it. That's very similar to the kind of language that ancient Near Eastern literature uses to describe victory in warfare. So with that in mind, and some of these things, that's why we have to dig into the history and culture and how there was a lot of saber rattling back then.
Oh, yeah.
Just like there is now in that part of the world. And saber rattling is not intended to be taken as historiography. So keep that in mind. I'll unpack that more tomorrow night, so make sure you're there.
That's good stuff right there.
I believe you just because you used the word historiography, and that's not a word you hear.
I try to make up at least one word a day. Yeah. But no, all that to say, the point is, evidence. All the evidence we have strongly suggests there were no non-combatants killed in the Battle of Jericho. So it would have been military, political, and religious leaders who were all kind of combatants in that day and age.
Yeah.
So God retains his character as we know him. We just have to be aware of how things were communicated and done back then.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated to hear more about this because it follows in line with something we've been talking about in the last couple of months, really is, and you mentioned it, that we talked about it last Wednesday about the Bible, it being trustworthy and why. But so I think so many Christians say, well, there's stuff in there that some people or skeptics may say, well, what about this part? This can't be true, can it? And I think the process of digging into it and investigating and using all of the resources possible to show that it actually does hold up. And that's really important, I think, for us to number one, to question, to doubt. This came up last Wednesday about, what if my teenager's struggling? And you said, yes,
That's good.
they're right where we need them. And that's something that I took to heart and have for several years now. If my kids are questioning or doubting, that's good because they're engaging and they're trying to figure it out for themselves, which you have to own your faith. It's not something that, at least in my experience, long term, you can just take spoon fed and live off of that.
Yeah.
You have to mature in your faith. And so many, and I made this comment last Wednesday too, is that so many, I think adults, we talked about adults are just little kids in big bodies.
Oh yeah, we are.
And to a lot of extent in our faith as well, we take the stories we learned, the story of Jonah and Moses and all the Bible stories, if we grew up in church, that we learned. And that's all we ever get to for many of us.
Yeah.
And it's really important to, as we mature, graduate from milk to solid food to that, not only in what we're taking in, but also how we're processing that. And I think that's really important. And that's what I see happening on Wednesday nights with FAQ, that people are actually asking questions and engaging. And that's super important.
Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah.
And, it's fun to do that. I'm anticipating, because any other time I've taught this, what's come up is, well, but Jesus, did Jesus do any of that exaggerating and embellishing? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He actually used this form of discussing something in the Olivet Discourse when he talks about the destruction of the temple, and he actually says, not one stone will be left upon another. That's specific. I mean, that is a phrase that was used throughout all antiquity to talk about the utter destruction of something. Well, the problem is, if you go to the Temple Mount today, there is still, there's the Western Wall, which is stones standing on top of one another. So either Jesus is a liar or he's misled. Both of those would mean, okay, then his testimony is wonky. Yeah. Or he's speaking in a way that we need to understand better. And I would say it's the third. And the Bible has a lot of that in it. There's a whole category of literature called rabbinic hyperbole. It's the way the rabbis would teach. And it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. So is he saying literally? No, no. And that's the difference between, taking the Bible literally and literalistically. Literalistically is like, so are we really going to get a camel and really make it go through the eye of a needle? No.
Ooh, I need to go apologize to some camels real quick.
I know, right? Be back. Yeah. So, taking the Bible literally means interpreting it according to the type of literature that we're dealing with, what's in front of us, what kind of genre is it, and what are the rules for interpreting and understanding that type of literature. Literalistic is when everything's got to have a one-to-one, you got to destroy camels.
I always thought that's where the two-hump camels came from. They just got stuck there.
So that's enough of that for now.
But going to that just a little bit, I mean, it went in Kevin.
No, I'm done.
To your point is
it's just supposed to be a teaser, Glenn.
But I just got to say this, because when you're talking about when Jesus said, so for the little children to come into me, you must have that childlike faith. Because kids are great about, oh yeah, I'll jump off the roof into your arms, but they're also like raise an eyebrow and look at you, like put their hands on their hips and say like, what? No, negative. So, they have that, okay, I'll follow, but you better not be messing with me kind of thing too. And,
well, I wonder if it's more willingness or ability to believe. And it's not that simpleness is like a simpleton, not sophisticated, but there's something that the innocence of a child has that we lose as adults that I think is a barrier for us. At least that's how I think about it.
Yeah. I think it's just that innate, I want to say something, but I can't. It's that innate meter to be able to say, yes, that's genuine and that's not genuine. And I think that's what we like to kind of work out of people a lot of times as they grow. We kind of want to mold them into our likenesses and not so much the likeness of God. So interesting stuff for sure. I love that stuff.
Stay tuned,
I love anything
everybody.
that has to do with like military history of that time frame too, because that's just really interesting stuff that you just can't, it's not like we get to go down to Shiloh and walk around and see some of that stuff.
Right.
So And, always interested to see what people are doing with slushies in the Bible.
Oh yeah. So yeah, Wednesday night, 6:45.
That'll be fun.
Frequently asked questions.
Yes.
That sounds like some real true West Tennessean over there. That's
Yes, I know.
Well, we're here today with Ron Hornburger. Ron, you are what is your actual title on the board of directors?
President of the corporation, and then chair of the board of directors.
Okay, so chair of the board of directors and we do now have a board of directors. And back when we were Methodist, we had like trustees and administrative council and finance team and more of those administrative kind of things. Is that what the board of directors has come to replace, or what's the actual role of the board of directors as a part of Northside Church?
Well, a portion of the original things that all the different committees used to do. Mm-hmm. Some of them have been rolled into the board of servant directors, but generally the board manages and is responsible for the business affairs of the church to help carry out the purpose of the church.
Okay.
And specifically, some of the things are working with the pastors and the staff, mm-hmm. Maintenance and improvements for the buildings and the grounds, improving or approving the annual budget, appointing new corporate officers, the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer of the board of the corporation. Mm-hmm. And then all of these actions require a quorum and a 2/3 vote of the members present at any meeting to do those things. There's some additional duties they do in that we monitor and audit the financials through a finance sub-team made up of 3 of the board members. Mm-hmm. Approval of all contracts and purchase agreements and leases come through the board of servant directors. Also approval of any non-budgeted or special project expenditures. And then the president and the vice president of the board of servant directors works with the chair and vice chair of the elders to appoint a pastor search team in the case of where we recruit pastors. Mm-hmm. Then that approval to employ pastors then has to be done through a combined 2/3 vote of both those boards together.
Okay. So basically, y'all act like the administrative arm of our leadership team, right?
Yeah.
And a perfect example of that is when, Rev Kev is here with us today too. And when we went and found him.
That pastor search team, they don't need to do any more work, hopefully, for 20, 25 years or so.
And we hope so too.
Yeah. And so that's a great example.
My vitamins were going for 30.
Oh,
okay, good.
Vitamins. And another really kind of crazy thing is recently we out here by the gym, we had someone take one of our air conditioning units. And so y'all are the ones who get bids and all that stuff, right? To
take care of
to make that happen.
Insurance problems, anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything like that pops up. Good deal. Now, you've used the word, I just want to make sure that everybody's totally clear on this. You've used the word corporation a few different times already, but we are a nonprofit we're a church, we're a religious organization, right?
That's correct. A nonprofit corporation.
All right. Yep. So a lot of people aren't used to hearing that terminology.
Yeah. In order to transition from the United Methodist Conference, we had to form a corporation.
Okay.
So then we had to write bylaws and all of that to go by, and all of these things that the directors do and the elders and all that's written out in the bylaws as to how it operates and who's on it and for how long, all those things.
Yeah. Now, who is on the board of directors now? So that's not like the pastors just get all their best friends on there and kind of. So how does that process work of how you end up on the board of directors?
No, in fact, that was one of the things that the church lay members wanted to do, was to have 3 autonomous groups, entities. One is the board of servant directors, one is the pastors, made up of the pastors, and then the other is the board of elders.
Okay.
And those in combination, nothing can actually be done without some coordination between them and approvals between those. But on the board of servant directors, it's made up of 15 members. And right now we have Sean Wiley, Amy Ray, Jamie Mobley, Ben Ferguson, Bob Sharp, Mike Ashley, Ken Chilcutt, myself, Robin Bradley, Annette Striligus, Lee Thomas, Glenn Laster, Josh Hayes, Josh Bard, Steve Little, and that makes up the 15 members of the board. So it's a lay-led group, and they get to those positions through the nominations team. There's a nomination team who looks at many different things and discerns and comes up with people to nominate to be on these boards.
How long does someone serve on the board once they're?
Well, their term is normally 3 years.
Okay.
But we do, when we set it up, we set up a 1 year, a 2 year, and a 3 year class. So the 15 members are broken up into three 5-person classes. So every 3 years, every year one team rotates off, but we keep the other two teams on, and a new team comes back. So they rotate out. Like we have a team of 5 that will go off in this year, 2021, and then there's a team for 2022 and 2023.
Yeah.
So this year, the nominations team will nominate folks to replace those people. Now they can serve, by the bylaws, they can serve 2 consecutive terms, but that's it.
All right.
So they can be renominated to be back on the board for 2 consecutive terms.
And the way it's set up is really good, and I've experienced this other places too, because there's always opportunities with new people coming on the team to bring new ideas, to bring new perspectives, and it keeps things from stagnating. So I really like that about the way it's been structured, and it's in some ways it's really similar in terms of terminology and think to secular corporations in some ways. And one of the reasons is because that actually has proven that it works, and the checks and balances are really important. Even though we're a church, there's a lot of business that has to go on, and we want to make sure that we're as good of stewards of those decisions as we can be. So I'm really glad to hear about this level of organization and structure. It's really important.
And so often people look at the pastors or, staff or Sunday school teachers and small group leaders, and, they're always the ones that are out there doing quote unquote ministry. They're right in the face of people and they're helping them walk through. But as we've learned in Northside for, some period, we were reminded often that administration is a spiritual gift. Right. It's a true ministry area. Right. And these people seem to really have a major heart for doing that. I know, Ron, you're one of those people who really have a heart for that.
I understand too that, of course, the nomination team looks at those things and tries to put people in the positions that they have qualities for. So that helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and they pray for those people. And,
prayer and discernment is a big part of that.
Yeah. And they don't just walk up to you in the hall or out here on the parking lot and go, "Hey, guess what?
Yeah.
We think you'd be good."
You do have an opportunity to not take it if you want to, but most people are more than willing to serve.
Well, it's a really special and important, and and the people who went through us leaving the church or the denomination and bringing a new pastor and all of that y'all been busy lately.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This past year, even though COVID had everybody else busy, there was still a lot of things that lockdown, rather, there was still a lot of things we were quite busy at.
Yeah.
Especially when we had to also recruit a new pastor as well.
Yeah. Well, we do appreciate everything y'all do for us. I mean, goodness. And that's the thing is, a lot of people didn't know. Are those closed meetings or are they open to any church member that would want to come?
They're open meetings other than, according to the bylaws, they're open meetings other than if there is a personnel type issue and something that's personal like that. They would be closed meetings.
Okay.
But otherwise, yes, they're open meetings for the business of the church.
And I believe I'm correct. And Patrick, you can help us answer this question probably better than anybody else. There is a copy of the bylaws on the website, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
See.
Yep. We have all of those on there. And of course we look at that every year to see if there's changes that need to be made, because as we said, we're new, so we're learning, and there's times that things come up and say, okay, well, that needs to be tweaked a little bit,
Yeah.
And we have made some changes from when it was originally written.
Okay, cool.
But the structure, basically the way we used to be, we had a lot of many different committees.
Yeah.
So we had missions committees, we had the staff parish committees, finance, trustees, and then there was a church council who was a big group that did the overall approval.
Yeah.
Well, basically those things were kind of incorporated into these three different groups. So like the Board of Servant Directors is now made up of what used to be the trustees and the finance and the nominations, and then they share a responsibility of the staff parish part of it, which is recruiting pastors and dealing with pastoral issues. And then there's the pastors who are responsible for worship, vision, teaching, pastoral care, and then they're also share responsibility in staff parish committees. And then the Board of Elders is outreach, discipleship, age level ministry teams, nurturing, and they share also on also the staff parish part.
Yeah.
So they all have to work together to accomplish the overall goal for Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I know you probably met more often lately, but how often would you typically meet?
It's by the bylaws, we're required to meet at least 4 times a year.
Okay.
Once
so
a quarter.
Once a quarter or something like that.
But you can have special call meetings for issues that do jump up, like
Yeah.
someone taking your air conditioner, and those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ron, thanks for dropping by the podcast. One of the funny things is, like so many other people, Ron walked in, I didn't know this was here. So when did all this show up?
Yeah, it's great.
But it's really not that elaborate in here.
Yeah.
No, but wait till we bring on the four square with a dome over it that we're going to be bringing from the youth for the budget this year.
Okay.
You think that'll pass?
Throw it in there. There's 15 people to look at it. So.
You guys, one of the exciting things you guys are doing right now is the getting things ready for the new sign.
It's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's moving right along.
Good.
We've actually, I've turned it over to a couple of different companies in town, and then they're looking at giving us bids on that.
Great.
And it's a great design, thanks to some folks in this room.
Yeah, that's we're excited about the sign, and that's going to look a lot better. At least the bag is going to go over it anyway.
Yeah.
So
What I'm actually excited to talk about, I'm just going to jump on in here, is Ron is wearing a hat today. And he was talking a little bit before we went on air about a story about that. I'd like to hear more about Ron. And many people know you. Some people don't know you, but kind of when you came to Northside and a little bit more about you, and definitely talk about the hat.
The hat. My wife and I, Donna, joined Northside about a week after Pastor Don came. So we've been here about 20 years as well. We came from Inglewood. We were members there for many years. And we loved it here. My wife worked at the bookstore here that one of the members owned, and they invited us to come, and we loved it. So we've been here ever since.
Okay, cool.
But my cap happens to be all of the different Mickey Mouse characters from beginning to present. And that was one of my favorite characters. And the story was that back when I was working, been a long time ago.
You work a lot now.
Well, for a living.
There you go.
And we used to have the Special Olympics. We sponsored those through our company, Bell South. And I would dress up as Mickey Mouse. Black leotards, red short, black buttons. My beard was black then, and it wasn't hard to make a Mickey Mouse face with Mickey Mouse ears and gloves. And so I was there to entertain the Special Olympics kids.
Well, as a podcast, we'd get in a lot of really, really big trouble with our listeners if I didn't do this right here. Because you are retired, you are also one of the, what we used to the Navy called them plank owners. You're one of the originators and first design people of 4 Men and a Hammer.
Oh, well, that's true.
And
one of the original 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so who were the original 4? I know y'all have kind of grown.
Myself and Ed Bodkins and Royce McGee. And then Mike Hibbs. Yeah.
Okay.
Hibbs. He's been gone a little while. But we were the original 4. And how we got that name was we would always meet at McDonald's in the morning and plan our day. So we got to calling that the office. So we'd say, I'll meet you at the office in the morning. Yeah, okay. So one day our wives came in with these shirts and had a little hammer up here, and under it said 4 Men and a Hammer, and on the back it said, meet me at the office. So they got to calling us 4 Men and a Hammer. And so from that, people started joining. Now I think we have probably 6 or 8 or 10 that are part of the group. When we moved off of 4, we got to wondering, the first one that came on made us 5. We were trying to figure out what to call ourselves then, and I kind of came up with the idea that, well, since we have, 5 guys out there, that we could probably be 5 males, hammers and nails. But that might not go over well in today's terms. So, but anyway, we've had fun doing a lot of things at the church, and then for some of the members too as well.
Well, and some other places and nonprofits in town, a lot of people owe y'all a big hug and a big thank you. So definitely thank you for all the work they've done as well. And that's work, again, a lot like the board of directors. It just kind of happens on the backside that people don't know about. But that's cool. So
I'm one of those people because we were in between houses and we really needed something done at our house, but I wasn't around, and my wife was trying to get things in, and they were able to come in. So the thanks go to your group for sure. But it's it's like so many things here. Ministry is so much different than I think what the outsider might think. It's not just pastors doing ministry. Exactly. It's anybody. Exactly. It's all of us. Mm-hmm. Sharing the gifts we have, whether it's a spiritual gift, whether it's, some of us can pull cable. Yeah. We're cable installers, and that can be applied here. So again, for anybody listening and thinking, well, maybe I can't do things like 4 Men and a Hammer, or I'm not a pastor or whatever. There are definitely ways that you can share your own personality at Northside Church, and that's what we're all about. A bunch of different kinds of people coming together to worship Jesus and serve. Yeah. So,
well, if I ever join 4 Men and Hammers, I'm just going to have a T-shirt with a big gopher on it because I can go for this and go for that for them. That's about what I'm going to be good for. So, well, Ron, thanks for dropping by and help us to understand the board of directors a little bit better, and 4 Men and a Hammer, and just for being here with us in the podcast room, and for all y'all do. We do give you thanks, and
thank you for
and share that with the board.
It's good to be able to get this out, because I know a lot of times people are asking questions. They don't really understand what our structure is since we left the denomination.
Well, it's important for us to know.
Non-denominational. So so the more people ask, I'd like, hope people do come and ask us, and get informed about how it's all set up now. Yeah.
Well, if you don't know what Ron looks like, he's the guy walking around the church, looks like Mickey Mouse. And so
sometimes with a gray beard.
But if you do have questions about the structure and the bylaws and things, those are on the website. And I
will share one more thing with you. As we indicated, there is a board of servant directors, but there's also a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer of the corporation. Northside is incorporated.
Yeah.
And right now I'm the president. Ben Ferguson is vice president. Annette Streligus is our secretary, and Monica Harris is the treasurer and also the business manager for the church.
Well, thanks for explaining what those 2 big dudes with dark sunglasses and business suits are standing around you. I wasn't real sure why they were here, but now we know. The president's here. The president's here. Right. So, well, glad you are here, and really there aren't 2 big dudes here. But let me ask you one question. Okay. Or 3 questions, really. Okay. Who's your favorite Bible character?
Oh, Jesus.
There you go.
The second time. Only the second time. What's your favorite Bible verse?
John 3:16.
All right. And what's your favorite Bible story?
The exit from the whale.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
That's another new one.
Spit out right there in the middle of the water.
That is awesome. Well, good. So that was 3 for 30, 30 for 3. We don't know what we call it anymore, but we're glad that you're here.
All right, thanks.
So, well, good deal. And that's been Ron Hornburger with the board of directors here at Northside.
Yeah.
We teased this a few weeks ago. We do have a new segment.
Yes.
Patrick.
We do. What is it? It's cue thunder sound effect. ParaNorthside Activity. So.
And you were dressed for the occasion, too.
I did. I wore my paranormal shirt today just for this.
There will be a picture taken.
Yes.
Hey, when I was in Key West, I saw this. No, it wasn't Key West. Anyway, I don't remember where I was, but it was this kind of Jimmy Buffett knockoff place, but also paranormal. And,
Ooh.
So Jimmy Buffett, people who are fans of Jimmy Buffett are known as parrot heads.
Yep.
Right?
Right here.
And so this was called ParaNormal Activity.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
There we
It
go.
was so, it
That's
was
pretty
it
good.
was neat. Yeah.
Well, in honor of the month of October,
Yes.
let's gather around the campfire.
I'm here. I'm all in.
At the end of the 17th century, a reverend was appointed the rector of the established church of Epworth, Lincolnshire. It dated back to the stormy days of Edward II, and it was as damp as it was old. Located in the Isle of Axholme, in a stretch of country surrounded by 4 rivers, it was essentially underwater. It was dreary, to say the least. The Reverend trudged through the quagmire, leading the carts bearing his large family of wife and 19 children, and their few belongings to their new home. His heart sank as he gazed down one straggling street to the rectory of mud and thatch. To make matters worse, he was a zealous high churchman, and he found out that his new parishioners were more Presbyterian-minded and hated ritualism. He lost no time trying to stamp the imprint of his vigorous personality onto the notoriously lawless and violent natives of the Isle of Axholme. He ruled with an iron rod. Thus they should think, thus they should do, thus they should go. Above all, the Reverend never let them forget about their duty to tithe. Maybe it was out of necessity trying to feed his 19 children, but in a community of impoverished people it fell on the ears of already angry and put-out islanders. And for them, the angry words turned to deeds. Among the many attempts to run the preacher out of town, they burned the Reverend's barn and had him thrown into jail. After he refused to leave, they burned his barn again, killed his cattle, and lit the rectory on fire. However, the Reverend was still even more determined and set about building a new rectory. The new rectory was not made of mud and thatch as the previous one had been. No, he built this one much larger and out of substantial brick. It was a monument to his defiance, and this seemed to shame the villagers into leaving him alone, and some even gained a hard-earned respect for the preacher. And he was left in peace for years. Until the fateful night of December 1st, 1716, when everything changed. The Reverend's sons were away from home, but he, his wife Susanna, 7 daughters, their manservant Robert Brown, and maidservant Nanny Marshall were all still in the home. Nanny was the first to hear blood-curdling groans like that of a dying man coming from the dining room door. They made her hair stand on end. She ran and told Susanna what she had heard. The Reverend's wife and daughters all tried to help her laugh it off, but their laughter did little to ease Nanny's mind. Their laughter was silenced when the next night loud knocks began to be heard in different parts of the house, accompanied by more groans and footsteps ascending and descending the stairs at all hours of the night. Oddly enough, the Reverend was the only member of the family that did not experience any of the strange things that began happening in the house. This made his wife and children afraid that his death was imminent. It was a local superstition that in hauntings like this, the person undisturbed was marked for an early demise. The Reverend continued on unfazed, as did the ghost, whose knockings and groanings escalated and became so frightening that none of the girls wanted to be in the house alone. Susanna pleaded with her husband to get help, but after listening to her concerns, he burst into a storm of wrath and yelling at his wife, believing it was all nonsense or it was a trick being played on them by the girls or one of their suitors. At this, the girls became angry that their father would even accuse them, and they wished that the ghost would continue until the Reverend was convinced. They didn't have to wait long. because the very next night he heard 9 loud knocks in his bedchamber. He leapt up and groped for a light, and we can imagine that Susanna said, "I told you so." The phenomena continued to escalate. The family would experience hearing footsteps as if several people were walking in the rooms above them, heard rustling noises like someone in a silk nightgown following them around, chains being rattled, and always more knocking. The ghost became such a part of their lives that the children named it Old Jeffrey. One night, after being awakened by the knocking, the Reverend began to investigate. After trying to figure out where the noises were coming from, he issued the spirit a challenge. "Thou deaf and dumb devil," he shouted, "why dost thou frighten these children? Come to me, come to my study." As if in answer to his challenges, Old Jeffrey responded by slamming the door of his study forcefully, just as the Reverend was opening it. The Reverend also claimed to feel someone pressing on his chest later while he was lying in bed. So the Reverend came up with a solution. He bought a large dog, a mastiff, hoping to scare Jeffrey away. The dog, however, was terrified. It whimpered and hid behind the children whenever Old Jeffrey was active. One night, the noise was so loud, the Reverend and his wife thought it must be scaring the children. So they went down to the kitchen to light a candle. As they went, noises played around them. The sound of hanging pans hitting against one another, the sounds of coins tinkling across the floor. And when they got to the bottom of the stairs, there was a loud crashing sound, as if every bottle in the house was thrown to the ground at their feet. They lit the candle and went to check on the kids, whom they found fast asleep. After this, the Reverend decided he needed reinforcements, and the next morning sent a messenger to Mr. Hoole, who was the vicar in the nearby village of Haxey, asking for assistance in, quote, conjuring the evil spirit out of his house. Burning with curiosity, Mr. Hoole was at the Epworth Rectory before noon listening to the family recount their stories. While he was at the house, he experienced the knocking, and that night Old Jeffrey was so active that the Reverend became increasingly angry to the point of brandishing a pistol and threatening to fire in the direction that the knockings came from. After a night of terror, whether because of the Reverend or the ghost, Mr. Hoole galloped back to Haxey in a panic, having lost his desire to play exorcist. Up to this point, all of the phenomena had been auditory, and at night. But after Mr. Hoole was frightened away, things escalated again, and now the family and the servants began hearing and seeing things in the day as well as the night. One evening, Susanna and her daughter Emily saw something dart out from under the bed and disappear. Emily described it in a letter to her brother Samuel that this thing was, quote, like a badger, only without a head that was discernible. The servant Robert Brown saw the same apparition once in the badger form, and another time in the form of a white rabbit. Robert also witnessed the handle of the mill begin spinning on its own, and he said, quote, nothing vexed him but that the mill was empty. If corn had been in it, Old Jeffrey might have ground his heart out for him. He would never have disturbed him. One of the girls said she saw Old Jeffrey manifest as an old man with a long white robe that dragged to the floor. Old Jeffrey also began rattling door latches, moving objects around, and pushing people. One night while the kids were playing cards, Nancy was sitting on the bed when suddenly the bed lifted off the ground. She was so scared she jumped off the bed and the other children laughed, saying surely Old Jeffrey wouldn't run away with her. And they persuaded her back on the bed, where it suddenly lifted up again several times in quick succession. Nancy jumped off the bed and refused to sit on it again. After 2 months of this activity, Old Jeffrey disappeared, and the haunting ended as unceremoniously as it had begun. The Reverend and his family slowly returned to their normal way of life. However, the Reverend and his family would be forever changed, and the mark left by Old Jeffrey on the family is still being felt to this day. The Reverend, for those of you wondering, was none other than Samuel Wesley, and among his children was the founder of Methodism himself, John Wesley. We live in a world where the things we experience don't always have a natural or logical explanation. When we try to force our experiences to make them fit into our idea of how the world should work, or deny them altogether, we risk damaging our faith because we're essentially painting ourselves into a corner. Eventually, we're going to have a crisis of belief if we expect a world that we can't see to play by the rules of the world we can see. John Wesley wrote in his journal in 1768, "It is true likewise that the English in general, and indeed most of the men of learning in Europe, have given up all accounts of witches and apparitions as mere old wives' fables. I am sorry for it, and I willingly take this opportunity of entering my solemn protest against this violent compliment, which so many that believe the Bible pay to those who do not believe it. I owe them no such service. I take knowledge that these are at the bottom of the outcry which has been raised, and with such insolence spread through the land, in direct opposition not only to the Bible, but to the suffrage of the wisest and the best of men in all ages and nations. They well know, whether Christians know it or not, that the giving up of witchcraft is in effect giving up the Bible. With my latest breath, I will bear testimony against giving up to infidels one great proof of the invisible world. I mean that of witchcraft and apparitions, confirmed by the testimony of all ages. John Wesley saw supernatural phenomena as proof of the existence of a spiritual realm, and we should look at it the same way. Consider this. The kingdom of God is supernatural. Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, was born to a virgin. He performed miracles, healed the sick, walked on water, raised the dead, was himself resurrected after being crucified, and is alive right now. As incredible as all that is, as Christians, we say we believe it. We also say we believe in a spiritual realm, even though we can't see it with our physical eyes. Why is it such a leap, then, to believe that spiritual beings from that realm can interact with this one? Why is it so hard for people to believe in the things they can't see? Are ghosts real? Okay, that's the end of my story.
Oh, all right, that was the question.
That was the question.
Okay.
So,
Are ghosts real? Well, until they ride the Polar Express. Oh, wasn't that the question there? I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the first one to answer.
I think it's hard for some of us to believe in stuff we can't see because we're very tactile, very skeptical people. You know, I think that some of us for sure may tend not to believe until it's proven so.
Yeah.
Until you can touch it, you can feel it, you can see it, you know, it's not true. And I think that goes back to something we said before about the faith of a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thoughts of a child. You know, all of us, I think, have probably experienced this in some way, fashion, either as ourselves when we were younger or as a parent, that there's something under my bed. You know, it's not anything necessarily that they can show you, but the child believes there is something under the bed.
Yeah.
And there may or may not be, but they believe that very wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And so I think perhaps as adults, when we grow, we lose some of that innocence and that willingness to believe. That's how I think about that particular question.
Yeah. I think for me, I have a very complicated relationship with this particular subject. So while I don't know, I think a lot of these stories and a lot of things are just, they're things that we get taught and learned. They're fairy tales almost. And so that's one side of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it is our faith journey, and it's a spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading something not long ago. There's a difference between spirit and ghosts. And while, you know, they're both addressed in different ways, but I don't know, you know, because, you know, I like to think Casper's really nice and fun and, you know, and that beetle guy and the people that live in that house, you know, that's a fun movie. But, you know, but then I also get that there's a really true spiritual warfare type thing goes on, but I don't know if that is in the same realm as ghosts and ghost stories and ghost, you know, because at church camps over the years, of course you do youth ministry. Every church camp I ever went to had a lady by the lake, you know, and so I don't know. It's so hard, and so I'm such a person. I don't want to put things I can't understand into a box. Mm-hmm. And go, that's the answer, because it's one of those things that I don't know if I know the answer to. So
yeah, I guess to really know the answer would be to know what happens when we die.
Yeah.
And I don't think, you know, until we die, we're going to know for sure. So,
Right.
I mean, there's lots of theory and speculation. And I guess it depends on how we define the word ghost,
yeah,
you know.
But I do think, to your point, I think as Christians, it's worth wrestling with because without the fact that Jesus is alive and we can't see him, if we don't accept that, then we don't have much at all to stand on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole reason why we have a chance of redemption in God's eyes. So there has to be that. And I would say, well, yeah, I believe in that. But so why is it so difficult to believe that there's still angels, demons, and spiritual warfare for some of us? Now, some people are very able to go there, but other people are like myself have been not skeptical, but it's hard to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I have in my office a voodoo stick from Haiti. And to me, it's a stick with ornamental carvings on it, and in order to make money from some American that has come down here, and you're going to say it's a voodoo stick. Now, I doubt any voodoo priest ever prayed over it or whatever. But I have had people walk in my office and go, "Oh, what in the world? There's a voodoo stick. I don't give it any power. It's a stick. It has no power to me in any form or fashion, other than unless I hit you with it, then that's a major, but it's not there. It's just there to remind me of that time. And for me, that was a cool reminder. I don't know.
I brought some scripture references.
Yeah. I think that's very appropriate.
A good place to start is, in the Bible. Yep. But one verse that jumps out at me on this is, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. That's Colossians 1:16. Mm-hmm. So, and again, we hear in Hebrews all the time, we hear this one, that now faith is the confidence of what we hope for and the assurance of things we do not see. So by faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Now, think about that for a minute.
Yeah. Well, I think the Colossians passage gives a pretty good thing, or pretty good, casts a pretty good net, I should say, a pretty wide net. But it also gives some definitions. So, all things were created by him and for him, whether visible or invisible, whether thrones, dominions. And so it seems to describe what are those things that are both seen and unseen. Mm-hmm. And so kind of where I land on all of this is, definitely believe in the supernatural realm, or I would be a deist, like Thomas Jefferson. Let's tear out all of the, I don't know, listeners may or may not know, but Thomas Jefferson kind of created his own Bible, and it was devoid of any and all the miracles of Jesus, because he didn't believe that stuff. And so, I'm definitely not a deist. I believe in the supernatural. I believe in the miraculous. And I think within that supernatural realm, of course, there are spirits. I don't know that I'm able to agree to those spirits being the disembodied souls of individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that. I think that the scripture says it's appointed once for man to die and then the judgment. And so I tend to think that whatever people are having a paranormal encounter with, which I really do believe a lot of people are having encounters with the paranormal, that those are some kind of manifestation of spiritual beings. And I don't know of any other classifications of those than angels and demons. Now, again, I don't know of any others. I'm not familiar with any others. So, I kind of, on one hand, I don't think when people die that their spirits linger around. And I also don't believe that when people die, they become angels, so there's those things. But I do think that there are a number of different ways that a spiritual entity can manifest themselves. And if they're, pushing a penny across the table, or from Ghost, or if they're levitating something, or if they're full on possessing somebody. And I think they can be increasingly malevolent. And I think the reason so many times they start out very innocent is to ultimately, I want to say this, then I want to go back and qualify it, but draw people away from having their focus and attention on the Lord. I want to go back and qualify that by saying I don't think that I obviously would not say that anyone who is interested in paranormal things is drifting away from the Lord. I think that's a possibility depending on the doors that are open. But I think being interested in and exploring the area of the paranormal is something that some Christians are uniquely gifted and equipped to do.
Well, there is the passage where he's talking about the spiritual gifts. And one of the spiritual gifts is the discernment of spirits.
Yeah.
And so, to be able to discern between, whatever's out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's good that we're having, the reason I wanted to have these conversations is because I feel like a lot of times as Christians, we focus more on the intellectual or the doctrinal sides of Christianity and kind of forget about the spiritual side. But humans are spiritual beings, and if we don't talk about it in church, people are going to go look for answers elsewhere. And generally the answers they find elsewhere, probably aren't the right answers, or at least not the biblical answers. And so I think it's important that we talk about.
I smell a sermon series.
Well, hey, let's go. Come on.
Well, and I think
It smells like brimstone.
Because
sulfur. And
1 John 4:1 says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world." And then Ephesians 6:12, and this is the ESV, says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." And when Jesus cast Legion out into the pigs, they were like, "Don't mess with us, Jesus."
that sounded like Billy Goat Gruff.
Put us in the sheep.
Yeah, it was like,
But
please don't
seriously,
cast us out.
So they knew him. They knew him, and to our knowledge, they had not had a physical on earth gathering prior to that. So that had to have happened in a spiritual zone. I would think. My understanding is, I don't know what the Greek or Hebrew or anything else in all of that says, but to me, from what I understand, that had to have happened before there was an earthly setup there. And because because of John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. So Jesus' manifestation on the planet, there. So there is something to it. And I love the idea to think that there's some big hairy dude like Bigfoot out there wandering around free in the woods, and somebody gets to
Oh, don't worry, we'll get into cryptids
in
another
Loch
week.
Ness.
We're gonna stick with ghosts
because
right now.
because the
contraire.
and the Native Americans and so many people from the mountain men and stuff saw woolly mammoths and stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the day, they actually saw them, and they have them on pictures they made.
Yeah.
I love every bit of that. It's fun.
That's the debate within the cryptozoological and paranormal camps is Sasquatch a physical being only?
They're interdimensional
or
beings.
Is he
They're
interdimensional beings? That probably should be on another podcast. But I just will say I think he's an undiscovered primate.
We'll dig into that later.
But there's all kinds of fun in all of that.
Yeah, if we want to get into one of my, I don't think I actually believe this, but
I'm gonna say it anyway.
It's a fun theory that so in physics there's theoretically 10 spatial dimensions. So we live in our 3 dimensions, and a lot of time people say that time is the 4th dimension, but even then time is wibbly wobbly. So, but theoretically, there's up to 10 different spatial dimensions, and there's all these coexisting dimensions alongside of us that we just can't see. And so, some people speculate that there's a heaven dimension and a hell dimension, that they are all around us. And so, ghosts and things are people either in hell or in heaven that are sort of coming through the veil and breaking dimensions. So I don't know that I actually buy into that, because, I'm not big on quantum physics, but yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
There's some interesting stuff out there. And some of the youth and I've been talking a little bit about the dimension stuff and angels, the difference between angels and cherubs, and, so it's fun when they take Bible classes at school and then they come asking these questions, and it's fun to kind of know what you can figure out and what you don't know.
Well, I also like that there is mystery in our faith.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
to have faith, there needs to be mystery. You
Right.
know, we walk by faith, not by sight.
Yep.
So I think it's
Blessed are those who cannot put their finger in my hole in my hand or put their fist in my side. Blessed are they.
Without having seen it.
Yeah. So
Good questions for us to continue talking about.
but you never answered the question. Do you believe in ghosts?
I'm deferring to y'all's expertise.
Oh yeah, I believe in spirits, and I know I've already I can't. Let me put it this way: I always try to look for a rational, natural explanation anytime there's something funky that happens.
Yep.
Right, and I've had some encounters where there was no other explanation other than interacting with a person that I believe was at least possessed or severely oppressed by a demonic spirit. But more recently, I know there's kind of the running joke of Linda, the Northside ghost, and everything. And hey, I do not have another explanation for how my stapler would have just from a flat position. It was sitting on my bookshelf, flat. It wasn't on anything. And I heard boom, clank.
You get used to it.
and it fell over.
Fell over. Yep.
You get used to it. I'm telling you.
There are a lot of unexplained things that happen.
I had a box fall off of a shelf in my office today. It kind of happens. I've got a list of stories. Again, I know there's stories out there. If you have Linda the Northside ghost stories, please send them in.
And
I'll share some
and
of
hear
them.
us. We're not romanticizing. We're not making light of it. If that's what it was, then Linda is probably not that spirit's real name.
Probably not.
Probably not.
And so but.
Just like in the John Wesley story, I don't think Old Jeffrey was the name of that.
Jeffrey. Oh man, that's the giraffe from Toys R Us.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to be a Toys R Us kid.
I knew it was the devil.
Toys R Us. Who's making?
But I guess
comeback? Yeah.
my answer to that question is I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
either. There's a part of me that wants to, and another part of me is like, no, don't do that.
Well, there's examples in the Bible, like we talked about Legion. We talked about, we didn't talk about, one I had seen when I was looking through this is Saul.
The Witch of Endor.
Yes. Found a medium to bring back Samuel, right? Because he was having trouble. That's
Yeah.
same for Samuel 25, somewhere in the 20s there. Was it Job? One of Job's friends had an experience with something.
1 Samuel 28.
Yeah, it's 28.
3 through 25.
28. So so would we say that, well, that just happened back then and it's not true now? I think that it's hard to argue that.
Well, and I don't know that what that medium conjured was Samuel.
Fair. Yeah, because he believed it was, but
But that would have been the point, is to lead Saul away from what God had already told Saul to do. One of my professors called that, it was in an Old Testament class, he called that the Pythonic demon. And he said the Pythonic demon is a spiritual entity that understands and can imitate and deceive a person into believing they're talking to that individual, and that's what kind of they do. That's kind of their specialty.
I've heard that quite a bit, and that's probably the direction that I lean in my personal beliefs, because that's why you always see ghosts, as what you expect to see. You go to the asylum, you see a patient or a nurse. You go to an old German castle, you see an old German guy. You never see anybody that died last week, or the 2007 whatever walking walking down the street. It's always kind of what you expect to see. It's either this old pirate, or it's your great grandmother or something like that. It's the deceptive nature of it.
When the disciples were in the boat and Jesus was walking out, they first saw it, it's a ghost.
Yeah.
That was their initial response.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would they think?
I mean, that's probably what I would think too if I saw somebody walking
Exactly.
across a stormy sea to me.
Why would they think that? Yeah. So,
but I imagine it was culturally relevant in terms of what was talked about, what was believed at that time, right? That was a common thing.
And I think I don't know. I'd have to look at like what time, but I know there was a whole thing of the fourth watch of the night being the time when the veil, so to speak, between the natural and supernatural was at its thinnest, and that's when the most activity would take place, and so there was almost an expectation that, all right, if something crazy is going to happen, it's going to happen on fourth watch. So who wants fourth watch?
Not me.
The rookie.
I thought it was just like the full moon,
And that's why Grandma says nothing good happens after midnight.
Right.
Well, if you enjoyed this conversation, you want to hear more, make sure you tune in next week and the week after and the week after. During the month of October, we're going to try to unpack some more paranormal topics. And thanks to you guys for podcasting with me. Thanks to everybody out there for listening. Mm-hmm. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at Northside Now Podcast. Go to our website, northsidejackson.com, or email us at podcast@northsidejackson.com. We hope to hear from you soon. And once again, this is Patrick. This is Glenn.
This is Kevin.
Yeah, me too.
And that's what's happening at Northside Now.
Bye-bye.